सत श्री अकाल एंड वेलकम टू सीजे सिद्धू शो। जिस तरह तुहानूं पता ही है कि एवरी थर्सडे असी थोड़े रूबरू हुंदे हैं तो थोड़ी गलबात कराई दी है मोस्टली पॉलिटिशियंस नाल, पर देखीदा है किस तरह का माहौल है उस हिसाब नाल जे कम्यूनिटी नूं होर किसी चीज़ की इनफॉर्मेशन की लोड़ है उहदे बारे भी गलबात करी दी है। हुण देयर इज़ अ लॉट गोइंग ऑन इन सरी, इन ब्रिटिश कोलंबिया and Canada and worldwide. And my heart goes out to, there is so many things are happening, earthquake in Colombia, and the death toll rises 273 as of today, and there is 3,284 injured people. So there is a lot of humanitarian work is going on there. काफ़ी उत्थे काम हो रहा है, पर जिहड़े natural disasters जिहड़े हैगे है, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਨਵਾਇਰਮੈਂਟ ਦੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ ਉਹਦਾ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੁਣ ਆਪਣੇ ਚਾਰੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਲੁਕੋਇਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਅਰਥਕੁਏਕ ਦੀ ਬਰੀਫ ਖਬਰ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ। ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨਸ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨਾਲੋਂ ਵੱਡਾ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਫਿਕਰ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਹੈਗਾ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ US ਟ੍ਰੇਡ ਦਾ, ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟ ਟਰੰਪ will already threaten us to impose a 50% tariffs on a lot of other things that were exempt before, and that can put almost $284 billion on the businesses in coming years. And believe it or not, it affects Americans too, over $1 trillion in the next 10 years if it goes through. So the deadline hegi August 19. So our minister, senior minister, Mr. Dominic LeBlanc, and our trade negotiator Janice Charest, they are there negotiating. They're meeting today again. I hope by the time you see the show, there is a good news will come up. And it's a tough going, guys. The reason being, we can make a compromises. They said, well, bring the liquor back on the shelves. That's fine, but then you give us some concessions too. So ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੂਗਾ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਜੇਮਿਸਨ ਮੈਗਰੀਅਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਟ੍ਰੇਡ ਨੈਗੋਸ਼ੀਏਟਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਪਰ ਦ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਇਜ਼ ਦ ਫਾਈਨਲ ਡਿਸੀਜਨ ਮੇਕਰ ਇਜ਼ ਅ ਟਰੰਪ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਊਗੇ ਫਾਈਲ, ਉਹ ਫਿਰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ, ਡਿਪੈਂਡਿੰਗ। ਬਟ ਨਾਓ Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, is talking about that. He said, okay, if he gives us back something, we can bring the liquor back on the shelf, and other premiers are saying very similar things. So it's a very interesting, and it's putting a lot of businesses in a limbo. The business environment already is difficult as it is. On top of that, these tariffs doesn't help because the environment is so tense. People don't want to invest any more money. The affordability is already a big issue. So I hope something will come out of this deal. बाकी अपने ब्रिटिश कोलंबिया सारे नाल जिहड़ी दुख वाली गल हैगी है कि इत्थे अग्गां जिहड़ियां लगियां आ। So right now, as of today, there are 100 fires ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਬਲੀ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ ਆ, ਤੇ almost 20,000 people ਜਾਂ ਤਾਂ evacuated ਹੋ ਗਏ or they are on the list to be evacuated, and 10,000 people ਨੂੰ already evacuation ਦਾ alert ਹੈਗਾ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੇਲੇ ਵੀ ਘਰ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਪੈ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ। So Premier EB was there other day, and he's announcing some measures to calm down, because fire is a natural disaster. There's a lot of hard work going on. Our heart and thoughts with our firefighters doing a great job, and came from other countries, Mexico and other countries, to help them out, because this is the biggest disaster we ever seen. And ਘਰ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਜਾਣਾ, ਲੋਕੀ ਬੈਠੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਬਾਹਰ ਜਾਈ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੋਜ਼ੀਟਿਵ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਹੈ, ਪੈਂਬਰਟਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਟੈਂਪਲ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਇਨ ਪੈਂਟਿੰਗਟਨ, ਉੱਥੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪੂਰਾ ਲੰਗਰ ਲਾਇਆ ਆ, ਇਸ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਸੇਵਾ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ। ਉਹਦਾ ਐਪਰੀਸ਼ੀਏਸ਼ਨ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਆਲਵੇਜ਼ ਸਰਵਿਸ ਭਾਵਨਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਦਾ ਯੋਗਦਾਨ ਪਾਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਸਿੱਖ ਟੈਂਪਲ ਇਨ ਪੈਂਟਿੰਗਟਨ ਡੂਇੰਗ ਅ ਲੋਟ ਆਫ good work there, providing people food and shelter and whatever they can do. Even small community है, अपनी community भी उत्थे छोटी है, पर ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਵਜੂਦ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਭਾਵਨਾ ਆ ਉਹਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਪੋਜ਼ਿਟਿਵ ਇਫੈਕਟ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਤੇ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਆ। ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਵਾਈਲਡ ਫਾਇਰਸ ਹੈ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੂਗਾ ਬਈ ਇਹ ਆਈ ਹੋਪ ਇਟ ਵਿਲ ਕਮ ਅੰਡਰ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਸਮ ਪੀਪਲ ਵਿਲ ਬੀ ਗੋਇੰਗ ਬੈਕ ਟੂ ਦੇਅਰ ਹੋਮਸ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੈਰਾਮੀਟਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਆ, ਬਾਹਰ ਵੱਧ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਹੀ ਪਰ ਕਈ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ 'ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਕਰ ਰੱਖਿਆ। ਬਾਕੀ ਦ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਡਿਕਲੇਅਰਡ ਸਟੇਟ ਆਫ ਐਮਰਜੈਂਸੀ, ਉਹ ਸਟੇਟ ਆਫ ਐਮਰਜੈਂਸੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਈਆਂ ਨੇ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਵੀ ਉਹਦਾ ਕੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈ। ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੀਆਂ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਐਕਸਟਰਾ ਪਾਵਰਸ ਮਿਲ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ, so they can do lot of administrative things, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਹੋਟਲ ਰੂਮਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਸੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਫੋਰਸ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਅਕੋਮੋਡੇਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਣਾ। ਟਰੈਵਲਸ ਰੂਲਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਹਾਈਵੇਜ਼ ਉਹ ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਦੈਟ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਪਾਵਰਸ ਦੇ ਹੈਵ। ਬਾਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰਿਸੋਰਸਿਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਉਹਦਾ ਕੋਆਰਡੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਾਂ ਫਾਇਰ ਫਾਈਟਿੰਗ ਲਾ ਲਓ, ਮੈਡੀਕਲ ਹੈ, ਫਰੰਟ ਲਾਈਨ ਐਮਰਜੈਂਸੀ ਹੈ, ਸੋ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਅੰਡਰ ਉਹ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਇਹ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਲਾਈਫ ਥ੍ਰੈਟਨਿੰਗ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਦੈਨ ਯੂ ਕਾਲ 911, ਪਰ ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਹੈਲਥ ਐਡਵਾਈਜ਼ ਰਿਲੇਟਡ ਕੋਈ ਸਮੋਕ ਸਿਮਟਮਸ ਹੈ ਦੈਟ ਡੋਂਟ ਕਾਲ 911, ਕਾਲ 811। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਾਈਡ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਦੇਰ ਇਜ਼ ਏ ਵੈਕੂਈ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਸਰਵਿਸਿਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਲਪਲਾਈਨ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਜੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਹੈਲਪ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ 1-800-387-4258। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਆਪਣੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਲੋਕੀ 20,000 ਦੇ ਕਰੀਬ ਜਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਦੇ ਘਰ ਤੋਂ ਬੇਘਰ ਹੋ ਗਏ, ਸਮਰਲੈਂਡ, ਪੀਚਲੈਂਡ, ਇਟਸ ਜਸਟ ਡੈਵਸਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇਅਰ and our thoughts and prayers with all those families and lot of pets and animals are affected too, but a lot of charities, BC, SPCA doing a lot of good work to make sure that they will not hurt as much. And so our hearts goes out to all the volunteers, firefighters, all the people, first responders that are helping them. I hope that things will come under control. And then coming last to Surrey, British Columbia, the civic elections are in a full swing. And lately, there is 6-7 slates. Now mudslinging is started. They're accusing each other, and that will be not a nice thing to do in politics. But, they say it's a dirty game or blood sport, so it's unfortunate. But we as a media, we go to all the events, we go to the press conferences, we ask all the candidates or mayors, candidates, the questions, and they answer, and the other group might take that out of context and use that comments. It's up to them because it's a public information. So we say neutral, we say non-partisan as a media, as a Sanjha TV. So we welcome everybody, all stripes, all political groups. Like, do you know provincially, we have, NDP people, we have a conservative MLAs. Today, luckily, we have an independent. So she don't wear any stripe, and she is a veteran as a community. But as a politician, she jumped into in 2022 in a by-election when Stephanie Kedu was left that seat. Kevin Falcon approached her, and she won that by-election in Surrey South. And then in the last election, she ran from Surrey Cloverdale. So she's MLA from Surrey Cloverdale. And then the parties have issues. She left, Liberal, then BC United it's called, to Conservatives, and then have issues with the Conservative Party. Ended up leaving that or was removed. I will check with her. Elenore, welcome to CJ Sidhu Show.
Thanks for having me again.
So politics is a pretty interesting game. And all over the landscape. Tell me a little bit, you were started with Kevin Falcon, BC Liberals, then become a BC United. Why don't we start there? Why you leave that and jump to Conservatives?
Well, if you remember, the Conservatives a couple of years ago had 1 or 2% only in the polls. John Rustad had joined them, then Bruce Spamman, and they started rising, and it was during a time when the federal Conservatives, their brand was very popular, and it almost looked like Pierre Poilievre might win the federal election. So the provincial Liberals that I belong to changed their name and started losing support very quickly. It started to become clear to many of us that we needed to get behind the party that was capturing the imagination of voters at the time. And that happened to be Conservatives, and I believe a lot of it hinged upon the name Conservative. People equated the party at that time with the federal party. So I was actually the fourth person to come over and join them, and I was followed after that by Teresa Watt, and then Trevor Halford, Ian Payton, and Peter Millibar came after that.
Yeah, so ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਨਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸ਼ੀ ਇਜ਼ MLA ਐਂਡ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਸ਼ੀਅਨਸ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਗੇਮ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ BC ਲਿਬਰਲਸ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵਸ ਨੂੰ ਆਏ ਸੋ ਉਦੋਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਨਾਮ ਚੇਂਜ ਕੀਤਾ ਐਂਡ ਦੈਨ 4 ਆਫ them ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਨਾਂ ਲਿਆ ਐਲਨੋਰ ਵਾਜ਼ ਵਨ ਆਫ them, ਟਰੀਸਾ ਵਾਟ, Trevor Halford ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੇਰੇ ਏਰੀਏ ਤੋਂ ਵਾਈਟ ਰੌਕ ਤੋਂ MLA ਹੈ ਐਂਡ ਈਅਨ ਪੇਟਨ ਫਰਮ ਸਾਊਥ ਡੈਲਟਾ ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਫਿਰ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਜੁਆਇਨ ਕਰ ਲਈ ਸੀ ਉਦੋਂ ਜੌਨ ਰਸਟੈਡ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਲੀਡਰ ਸੀਗੇ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜਿੱਤ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਾਰਨ ਸੀਗਾ ਉਹ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫੈਡਰਲੀ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਬੜੀ ਸਟਰੋਂਗ ਸੀ ਅਤੇ ਉਹ ਨਾਂ ਯੂਜ਼ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਦਾ ਬੈਨੀਫਿਟ ਮਿਲ ਗਿਆ ਸੋ then you came to a Conservative under John Rustad's leadership. What happened there when were you fired from there or you decided to leave or what happened there?
Fired, CJ. But let me just, take it back to, immediately after the 2024 election. So I was asked to come over because I am a fairly liberal person. I'm fiscally conservative or fiscally prudent, but I'm a socially progressive person. And, they wanted to attract to the Conservatives at that time people who would vote for someone like me, someone who wants to have a small but effective government, do a good job of managing people's money, prosperity for the province, but in terms of, practicing your religion or loving who you want, just be a good person and let the government stay out of your personal decisions. That's sort of my philosophy. So, they wanted to attract liberal voters, but it was clear to me really from day one after the election that wasn't their intention to continue to move to the middle and be that sort of bigger tent. We had early on some meetings, that's when Dallas Brody was still in the party, and I can remember her saying that, she never agreed to run to be part of a coalition, and so I think what really happened was, and this is my belief, that, Rustad and his team were telling different MLAs different things. For me, it was like, yes, we're moving to the middle to be a coalition. For someone like Dallas Brody, they were saying, we're never going to sell out to the Libs, right? I guess they forgot someday we would get together. So really beginning after that 2024 election, my relationship with John started becoming more difficult. He allowed an anti-LGBT group to come into the Hall of Honor, which I very much was unhappy about that, and was pushing the party to be a socially conservative party, and that's not aligned with me personally. John knew that I had those we had disagreements with each other, in private in our meetings, but he knew that I was unhappy with his leadership in that regard. After his leadership review, where I think, everybody knows it was in the public that he and his team had manufactured memberships. He'd even signed up dead people. right? So I had confronted him about that. I had been upset about that, and his response was to fire me. So it wasn't my choice to leave. Looking back now, I can see that, I was never well aligned with the Conservatives because I'm socially progressive. And especially now with Carrie Lynn Finley, they've gone even further into social conservatism.
I will fast forward to that one. So, Elenore ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ, so conservative 'ਚ ਇਹ ਆਏ, ਉੱਥੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੀਗਾ ਉਮੀਦ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ liberal side ਤੋਂ ਆਏ ਸੀਗੇ. So they will lean more in the middle, and ਇਹ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਟਰਾਈ ਸੀਗੀ, ਪਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰਾਸ਼ਟਰ ਦੀ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੀਪਲ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਐਂਟੀ LGBTQ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਇਮੋਸ਼ਨਸ ਆਏ, and Elenore being one of also LGBTQ member or whatever is called, but she is socially progressive and physically responsible. So ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਅਲਾਈਨ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਆ। ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਸੈਂਟੀਮੈਂਟ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਰਾਸਟੈਡ ਨੇ ਦੇਖੇ, ਸੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਫਿਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਾਇਰ ਕਰਤਾ। ਅਤੇ ਉਦੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਰਾਸਟੈਡ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਜਦੋਂ ਚੈਲੰਜ ਹੋਇਆ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੌਮੈਂਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਏ, ਉਹਦੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਾਰਟੀ 'ਚ ਉਦੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਕੱਢਤਾ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਇਜ਼ ਸਿਟਿੰਗ ਐਜ਼ ਐਨ independent right now. Now come to Carrie Lynn Finley, okay? So what do you think of her being a leader of BC Conservative Party?
Well, she's a very socially conservative person. I, would classify her personally, in my opinion, as being a Christian nationalist. She has and her husband have said some offensive things in the past with respect to the Muslims community. And, I just, she even chose to be her leader in the House because Carrie doesn't have a seat. Heather Maas, who is from Chilliwack, but had been censured for her things that she said when she was a school trustee. She's anti-SOGI. She is the one that brought the anti-LGBT group into the legislature. So, look, the whole thing is that everyone in Canada has the right to be respected. We have charter rights, and we can't allow for any kind of party that wants to really minimize or to harm the rights and dignity of any other group. To do that. And so for me, I think, she's now assembled around her, she's fired all the staff, she has brought in new staff. Apollo Chung is a part of her network. He's an Alberta separatist. She brought in another individual who's head of her research, who is a person who was part of the Wild Rose Party and was actually disqualified as a candidate, removed as a candidate because of anti-LGBT things that they had said in the past. So, Carrie Lynn has purported that she wants to have a big tent. But it's clear that if you're in the center or you're a liberal, that she doesn't mean you. She's very much looking for only the social conservatives. She ran a campaign that said she's looking for the true blue conservative, which, it appears to be that she's only interested in social conservatism. And I think that's not a good fit for the majority of British Columbians.
So, Elenore ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਕੈਰੀ ਲਿਨ ਫਿਲਨੀ ਬਾਰੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਹੈ? And as I hear from everywhere else, and Elenore said the same thing, that she is socially conservative, Christian nationalist, ਆਪਣੇ anti-SOGI, and the people, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੁਰਾਣਾ ਸਟਾਫ ਫਾਇਰ ਕਰਤਾ। ਹੁਣ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੀਪਲ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਰਿਕਰੂਟ ਕੀਤੇ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਥਾਟਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਹ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਮੋਰ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਰਾਈਟ ਵਿੰਗ ਕਾਈਂਡ ਆਫ ਪੋਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ। ਕੋਈ ਆਪਣੇ ਅਲਬਰਟਾ ਤੋਂ ਵਾਈਲਡ ਰੋਜ਼ 'ਚ ਉਹਨੇ ਕੰਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਹਾਇਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ। ਸੋ ਬੰਚ ਆਫ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨਿਊ ਸਟਾਫਰਸ ਆਰ right wing kind of people. And I will ask Elenore to just explain a little bit. So you are a socially progressive and she's socially conservative. Our viewers, tell them what do you think the fundamental difference?
Well, look, when you're a socially liberal person, I guess I'll just tell you my own philosophy, which is that, I believe that everyone's backgrounds and charter rights and personal decisions and personal beliefs about how they want to live their life should not be interfered with, or the government shouldn't have a say in what you're doing, as long as you're living within the law. But
I think Mr. Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's dad said that government don't have business in people's bedrooms.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Yeah.
That's what you try to say.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I guess, even when it comes to religion, there's no dominant religion in Canada. We all have the right to have our religions and our personal perspectives equally respected. And I also firmly believe that, freedom of religion means freedom from religion. It means that I don't enforce my beliefs upon you, CJ, and you don't put your beliefs upon me, and we're free to live the way that each of us choose. And that's what's beautiful about Canada, and that's what's beautiful about being in a country that's a mosaic and not a melting pot.
Yeah, multiculturalism.
Right, and we each get to experience our version of Canada. If you, I'm a Ukrainian Canadian, and so part of my family's traditions obviously are eating foods like pierogies and cabbage rolls and, borscht and a lot of Ukrainian foods, but that's our version of Canada, right?
Totally, yeah.
And if you're from maybe an Indian family, having your traditions, or if you're a Sikh or a Hindu, that's your version of being a Canadian, and each of us deserve to have our personal beliefs, or if you're a gay or lesbian or trans, or how you want to live your life, we all deserve that respect. And the law is very clear on that. And so when I see religious views being brought as interpretations into governance, or even the threat of a religious view or perspective being imposed on other people through government, I'm really nervous about that. Because, we all have our charter rights and we all have this great freedom in Canada, but it's fragile.
So let me summarize that, and then I will come to the other part of social conservatism. Want you to explain. So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਬੜਾ ਸਿੰਪਲ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ, ਆਪਣਾ ਚਾਰਟਰ ਆਫ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਹੈਗਾ ਇੱਥੇ, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, doesn't matter ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੇ ਹੈ, lesbian ਹੈ, Sikh ਹੈ, Hindu ਹੈ. That's what Elenore tried to say. So it's more liberalism. That's what Canada is, actually. Welcome everybody. She is of a Ukrainian descent. The pierogies khande hai, kuch karde, jide bhi religion eh mande hai. So that's the beauty of Canada. I always say that everybody is welcome. Culturally, ਆਪਾਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਆਪਾਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੂੰ ਮੰਨਦੇ ਆ, ਜੇ ਹਿੰਦੂ ਗੀਤਾ ਜਾਂ ਮਹਾਭਾਰਤ ਨੂੰ ਮੰਨਦੇ ਆ, ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਕ੍ਰਿਸਚੀਅਨ ਹੈ ਕ੍ਰਿਸਚੈਨਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਮੰਨਦਾ ਆ. So that's the beauty of Canada. That's what she's saying, the social progressivism. Now, that's very clear, and I always in favor of that personally as well, because that's the way Canada is.
The law is clear.
Lines are very clear, and it's embedded in our charter. It's not that you making up or I'm making up. ਇਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਚਾਰਟਰ ਆਫ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹ ਬੜਾ ਸਟਰੋਂਗ ਚੀਜ਼ ਹੈ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਬਚਾ ਕੇ ਵੀ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਹੈ. So having said that, on the other pendulum of Carolyn Finley we were talking about, that she's a Christian nationalist and socially conservative, what that means in your point of view?
Well, this is like a really complex topic, CJ, but they've made it really clear by really interacting and elevating voices I consider to be homophobic, transphobic, wanting to get rid of SOGI in schools. And, we've talked about this before. And,
yes.
And I even ran with the Conservatives before, so people might be like, well, you ran with them, and they've always sort of had this issue with SOGI. But I can tell you that when I was running with them, and we discussed it here, I am in favor of making sure that whatever resources are in school are appropriate for the age of the student.
Age appropriate.
And that they don't contain sexually explicit materials or images, right?
Totally.
And it doesn't matter who the depictions are, they should be appropriate.
I'm glad you're clearing that up, because our viewers and a lot of that in South Asian community, in my community, had those kind of thoughts, and you clarified that have to be age appropriate.
And so what's the difference, right? Like,
yeah.
What's the difference now? So how I interpret what they are saying and the voices which they elevate, it's not a question of whether the material is good or not. It's a question of whether or not they agree that, for example, a kid can be told that it's okay to be gay. But in Canada, it is.
Yes, yes.
But you're also free to teach your child whatever you want. If your religion says, for example, that is a sin, and that's your belief, you're actually free to believe that. And you're also free to talk to your kids about your faith. But in public institutions, we follow the Canadian law. And so there's a lot of misinformation being pushed by the Conservatives about being anti-SOGI, because I think that they are trying to lead people to believe that they will get rid of any reference to the LGBT community in schools, and they legally cannot do that. They legally cannot do that. The Supreme Court has ruled that they cannot exclude any materials based on any charter-protected category, whether it's a religion, a sexuality, a gender identity,
color of your skin,
women, men, your color, and
young or old.
Exactly. And so, this is where I feel that the social conservatism from the Conservatives bleeds over, because it really is founded in a religious belief that is really categorizes the LGBT community as being sinful and corrupting people, which is not my belief.
So Elenore ne badi clear kita hai, and there is a very clear line here. So मैं कैरीलिन फिनली बारे कर रहा सी, या तुसी कंजरवेटिव पार्टी या कंजरवेटिज्म ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰਾਈਟ ਵਿੰਗ ਪੀਪਲ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੋਮੋਫੋਬਿਕ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਜਾਂ ਟਰਾਂਸਫੋਬਿਕ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ, ਜਾਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਗੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਬੜਾ ਐਕਸਟ੍ਰੀਮ ਤੇ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਣਾ, ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਗਲਤ ਆ। ਪਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਬਈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪ 'ਚ ਕੀ ਬਲੀਵ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, that's fine. Everybody have their belief system. Nobody contradicts, because that's your fundamental right. If you believe in certain thing, that's okay. But don't tell other people that they can't.
Freedom of religion is freedom from religion.
Yeah.
So you may believe one thing to be true, like your Christian belief or other religious belief could be that homosexuality is a sin. And you can believe that. But you don't have the right to impose sanctions for that on other people, because in Canada, it's legal. It's a charter protected category, and we have to remember that. And when you start looking at this, eroding away at one charter right, if we allow people to erode the charter rights of one group, what stops them from eroding it for another group? Yeah.
So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਟੌਪਿਕ ਹੈ, I'm glad that we're clearing it up. So ਜਿਹੜਾ charter of rights ਹੈ, ਜਿਹੜੇ fundamental rights ਹੈ, ਜਿਹੜਾ embedded in our constitution, ਬਈ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਰੀਡਮ ਹੈਗਾ। ਤਾਂ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਕਦੇ ਉਹ ਹਾਇਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਹਾਇਰਿੰਗ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਪ੍ਰਮੋਸ਼ਨਸ ਹੁੰਦੇ, they always say race, religion, color of your skin, all those kind of, or your sexual orientation, and it shouldn't be held against, even for people with the disabilities.
100%.
Or you're young or
Absolutely,
old.
Yes.
So it's a and that's the beauty of Canada. I tell you, I get excited when I see the Canadian Charter and the freedoms, and we all enjoy that. We are talking openly on a talk show, and that we can talk about these things. We're blessed with that.
Absolutely. And when you just mentioned disability too, I mean, there are tons of people with disabilities that come here as refugees, because in other countries, people will not treat you well. They will shun you. You'll end up in poverty, being spit on in the street. And that's not how we treat people, whether it's a disability or any other charter protected category. And so for me, I do see this push towards social conservatism. I respect the beliefs of socially conservative people. I really do. But
Yeah, you know,
I
you're
just
very
don't
right.
agree with having those types of religious beliefs or personal beliefs, you know, leaking into governance. I think governance has to be very neutral.
And Elenore, even imposing on other people.
100%.
You live, like you said, you live the way you want to live, but don't tell anybody else that you can't live that way. Isn't that?
Exactly. Like, I would never tell somebody what religion to be, or, you know what I mean? And I think that it's just, it's a very frightening time right now. If we, you know, you look south of the border and you see that a lot of women's rights are being eroded, you know, the rights of the LGBT community, and a real push towards Christian nationalism. And it's not necessarily, you know, going to end up being a good fit for minorities. It's not a good fit for women whose rights are being eroded. And what I want to do and why I try to be so strong, and there's people who will watch your show and probably not like what I'm saying, but the reality is that I have to be strong about defending rights, even for groups of people that others may not agree with, because if we don't protect one right, we don't protect any of our rights. And we have to stand firm in Canada, because you're right, we have this treasure of human rights here, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We are one of the most free countries in the world, and it's worth protecting.
Yeah, and before I summarize that in Punjabi, you know, what I see as an intellectual person when we have discussions, we can agree to disagree. That's perfectly fine. You know, we're not imposing our views on anybody, and nobody else should do that same thing. So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੁਣ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ across the border, what's happening there, women's ਦੇ right ਲੈ ਲਓ, minorities ਦੇ rights ਲੈ ਲਓ, ਆਪਾਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਸੁਣਦੇ ਆ ਆਪਣੇ ਯਾਰ ਦੋਸਤ ਮਿੱਤਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਟਰੱਕਰਸ ਫੇਸ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫੜ ਲੈਂਦੇ just because of skin of color, and ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਕ੍ਰਿਸਚੀਅਨਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਮਤਲਬ ਪੁਸ਼ ਕਰਕੇ ਤੇ ਦੂਜੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਫੈਕਟ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ, that's what Elenore ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਕਿ she's not ashamed to share those views. That's what she's saying, that's how she feels. And I agree in a lot of ways. थोड़ा ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣੇ thought system ਹੈ, ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ religion ਹੈ, ਜਾਂ ਥੋੜੀ ਸੋਚ ਹੈ, that's perfectly fine, you know. And when I say agree to disagree, ਕਈ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਥੋੜੀ ਮੰਨੀ ਦੀਆਂ. The same thing goes with the politics, you know. And we have we have NDP, we have liberals, we have conservatives, and they have their platforms. We don't always agree with them, Elenore.
No, and I think, you know, you're just reminding me that one of the important things that we need to try to get back to is civility. You know, and you mentioned, like, we can agree to disagree. And I actually love debating with people that share different opinions than me.
Yeah.
And if we can have a healthy and respectful debate, heck, I might even learn something, right?
Totally,
Or maybe my perspectives could change on something.
Yeah.
But, you know, this last session in the spring, there was a lot of very concerning rhetoric, discriminatory language used in the House, by, you know, people like independent Tara Armstrong, who was asked to withdraw some comments that she made at one point. And, you know, look, we can't always hide behind this guise of like, well, it's free speech, we should say what we want. Technically, yeah. But if we want to be able to like move the needle, or, you know, have these dialogues where we learn from each other, it has to be founded in civility and respect.
Yeah, not offending people.
Not offending people, not like saying something outrageous just because you'll get more, you know, likes on social media or retweets. We're dealing with people's lives, and we're dealing with people's entire dignity. And like, I just, you know, we don't want to see a breakdown in our democracy. We want to strengthen it, and we strengthen it by having respectful discussions, putting factual information forward for people to make decisions. And so you're right, we don't always share the same ideas and platforms, and there's things that the NDP does, let me tell you, that annoys me to no end. But they're my political opponents and not my enemies.
True.
I have no political enemy, only an opponent. And even Carrie Lynn Finley, I don't classify her as an enemy.
No.
She is my opponent, and I just definitely disagree with her fundamentally on a lot of issues. But, you know, part of that civil discourse is that I shall treat her respectfully as an opponent and have a debate. I can't wait for the fall. It's going to be great.
So, can I come back to that, and then we will wrap up this part of the topic. ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਿਵਲ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਆਈਡੀਆ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰਨੇ ਆ, doesn't matter you're NDP or liberal or conservative, you are Christian or you're Sikh or Hindu, you are, you know, gay or you're straight, you know, you're person with the disabilities or you are, you know, ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਐਲਨੋਰ ਨੇ ਮੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਆ, and we have to stay on guard for these things, because otherwise people, what is happening in America, we don't want that happening in Canada. You know, I tell you, it's come to my mind when we talk about it. There is a fringe group of people I saw in Alberta and some other places that they rent a places and they are white supremacists.
Mm-hmm. And then they held a training thing. Yeah, that's so disturbing. Yeah.
Can you, do you have information? Can you mention?
Well, you know, only that it was reported in the media, like you mentioned, CJ, that, you know, groups of white supremacists had rented some properties in Alberta to host training. Yeah. And, you know, these camps, there was also an investigative report that had come out earlier this year about white supremacist groups operating out of these, you know, MMA gyms and stuff. So we're seeing a rise in white supremacist groups, in groups who would promote remigration, which is this belief that people of color primarily should be leaving this country and sent back to their origin countries, which is just a absolutely mind-bogglingly disgusting philosophy in my mind. But, you know, we're seeing this kind of push. And one of the things, and this is, I guess, where on the social conservative side, what I see is certainly none of these groups are speaking out against this. And where they have overlapping agendas, they are assisting one another. And so, you know.
That's so disturbing.
It is. And so you look, you know, whether it's the separatists in Alberta, but now we have separatists working for Carrie Lynn Finley. So, you know, intersectionality is something that you hear a lot, mostly on the left, dealing with, you know, social issues where they intersect, like racism and gender. But we have intersectionality on the right as well, which is where we have these white supremacist groups who want to fight and deport people of color, and you have some very extreme people saying that we have to block all immigration to Canada. And where these groups are intersecting, they actually empower each other.
That's a very good point. So, ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ white supremacist ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਇਹ ਸਿਰਫ ਗੋਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਕੰਟਰੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਗਰੁੱਪ ਉੱਥੇ ਅਲਬਰਟਾ 'ਚ ਕੋਈ ਥਾਂ ਰੈਂਟ ਕਰਕੇ ਤੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਉਹ ਟ੍ਰੇਨਿੰਗ ਆਰਮਸ ਦੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਬੰਦ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਲਰਡ ਪੀਪਲ ਹੈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੰਟਰੀ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਕੱਢ ਦਿਓ. ਦੈਟਸ ਵਾਟ ਐਲਨੋਰ ਇਜ਼ ਟਾਕਿੰਗ ਅਬਾਊਟ, ਐਂਡ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਦੇਖਿਆ. ਸੋ ਵੀ ਹੈਵ ਟੂ stay very alert about that, because, you know, thinking about a separatism movement and those kind of elements are there. And Elenore ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ 'ਚੋਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਕੈਰੀ ਲਿਨ ਫਿਨਲੀ ਦੀ ਟੀਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਆਏ ਆ. ਹਾਲਾਂਕਿ she mentioned that, but on our, until we get the exact information, I know that Elenore has been around. She was in a army, she was in a police, she will not say anything unkindly. She have a vetting process to make sure to make those kind of comments. So let's move on. What do you main thing as a MLA? You know, I know that it's very sensitive issues, but we need to talk about it. Having said that, what people are most concerned about at the street, British Columbians as a MLA, what do you hear from people?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time this summer mostly focusing on local issues in Surrey. We have a significant problem in healthcare. My office is getting, inundated with calls from people who continue to struggle to get health care, and that's here in Metro Vancouver. And we know that across the province, particularly in the interior and in the north, we're having ERs, emergency rooms, that are being shut down for multiple occurrences, for long durations, and people in communities are essentially without healthcare services. And I'm reliably informed, CJ, by very good sources that have told me that the situation at Surrey Memorial Hospital is worse than it was a couple of years ago when the doctors were protesting outside of City Hall.
I remember that. Yeah.
They had told me that it's not uncommon for them to have as many as 140 patients who've come through the emergency room, who are waiting to be admitted into another hospital bed, but are essentially sort of like on hold because there's no space to put them in the other wards. And so it really reduces the space that they can safely care for emergency patients, but also these patients who are sort of lingering, waiting for, being brought up on the ward where the special care they need is. They're also further away from medical dispensing. They don't have any privacy. And 140 beds, just to point out, is actually more beds than the entire beds that are being built in the Cloverdale Hospital.
Yeah.
So we're already so far behind. We were promised a second tower for Surrey Memorial Hospital, and there's still no business plan for it. And that was in 2023. The promise came from Adrian Dix. So we got a significant problem with healthcare. I think that people need to make more noise about this. We had a mayor in Merritt who's called for the federal government to take over interior health. And I hope in the municipal election that the municipal candidates make a racket here with the provincial government, because although healthcare is a provincial responsibility,
yes.
Municipal governments look after the care of people within communities. And what you're seeing happen in your community, you absolutely need to make a commitment that you will make some noise and rattle the cages that need to be rattled so that we can get better healthcare services, not only in Surrey and Metro Vancouver, but for the entire province.
So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ healthcare ਬਾਰੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਰਾਈਡਿੰਗ ਜਦੋਂ ਪੀਪਲਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ, they're most concerned about their health care. Surrey Memorial Hospital ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹਨੇ ਕਿ 140 patients ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ beds ਹੈਗੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਲਾਈਨ ਅਪ ਲੱਗੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ, and we know that the wait times and all that kind of things, there is dire situation. ਤੇ Elenore ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੈਰਿਟ ਦੇ ਮੇਅਰ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਹ ਅਥਾਰਟੀ ਤੋਂ ਚੱਕ ਕੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਟੇਕ ਓਵਰ ਕਰੋ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉੱਥੇ ਵੀਕਐਂਡਸ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਐਮਰਜੈਂਸੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਇਹ ਡਾਇਰ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨ ਬਣੀ ਹੈ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹਾਲਾਂਕਿ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਮੈਂਡੇਟ ਹੈਗਾ, ਪਰ ਬਾਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੁਣ ਮੇਅਰ ਦੇ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ, ਸਿਵਿਕ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅਵੇਅਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣ ਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਰੌਲਾ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਪੈਣਾ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਹੋਣਾ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੈਕੰਡ ਟਾਵਰ ਬਣਨਾ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਹਲੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਿਆ। ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੇਟ ਟਾਈਮਸ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਖਰਾਬ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ। and you know that million people in British Columbia, like 1 million, over a million people don't have attending a physician.
I know. It's really disheartening. We are supposed to have universal health care, but it's not universal if you can't access it. And as the population ages, which we're not prepared, really. Canada didn't do enough. We knew that this silver tsunami, they call it, was coming,
yes,
of aging people, and we didn't do enough to make sure that we would have the resources in place. And now, of course, every province, it's not just BC, but I do believe that the way in which our province is managing this problem is shameful. We just had the other day, the finance minister, Brenda Bailey, went on and did a press conference about the deficit being less by about $3 billion than originally projected. Part of the reason why it's less is because they got a windfall, a settlement from a tobacco lawsuit, and it was about $2.1 billion, okay, that was paid to the province. But think about this. The money from the tobacco lawsuit is meant to compensate us for money that we've spent or will spend in healthcare on people who develop smoking-related diseases or tobacco-related diseases. But instead of putting that $2.1 billion into health, which we know we have all these closures, we have all these problems, they use that money to pay the deficit down. If they were properly managing this province, those $2 billion would go directly into cancer care, training oncologists, going towards building our Surrey Memorial Second Tower, and improving healthcare across the province. Fiscal mismanagement is causing us to be cheated as British Columbians, out of this windfall, essentially. And, so we have this mayor from Merritt calling for the federal government to take over healthcare in the interior. But I don't agree that the federal government should take over, but I do agree we need new leadership, and David Eby should resign.
So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਦੇਖੋ ਬੜਾ ਸਟਰੋਂਗ ਸੈਂਟੀਮੈਂਟ ਨਾਲ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਲਮੋਸਟ ਫਾਈਨਲ ਕਮੈਂਟਸ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਕਪਲ ਆਫ ਮਿੰਟਸ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਬ੍ਰੈਂਡਾ ਬੇਲੀ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੁਣ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ $3 billion ਅਸੀਂ ਡੈਫੀਸਿਟ ਨੂੰ ਕੱਟ ਡਾਊਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਬੇਸਿਕਲੀ ਦੈਟ ਮਨੀ ਕੇਮ ਫਰੋਮ ਟੋਬੈਕੋ ਇੰਡਸਟਰੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੈਟਲਮੈਂਟ ਹੋਇਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ 1.2 ਬਿਲੀਅਨ ਹੋਏ ਆ। ਉਹ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਹੈਲਥ ਇੰਪਰੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਲਈ ਖਰਚ ਹੋਣੇ ਸੀ, ਨਾ ਕਿ ਡੈਟ ਨੂੰ ਘਟਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਯੂਜ਼ ਕਰਨੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ। ਅਤੇ ਜਿਸ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਮਿਸਮੈਨੇਜਮੈਂਟ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਐਲਨੋਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਹੈ ਡੇਵਿਡ ਈਬੀ ਨੂੰ ਸਟੈਪ ਡਾਊਨ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ। Your last comments. Thank you, first of all, coming on my show. We have a last couple of minutes left. What do you like to say at the end?
Well, I just, again, thank you, CJ, for having me on. Every time I come on, we have interesting conversations, and they're not always easy. And look, I think a lot of people are looking for hope after, the NDP has really done things that have damaged our economy and left people feeling like they don't have a lot of hope here. I don't think that the Conservatives are the alternative right now, but I don't want people to lose hope. Let's see if something else can come together and, continue to work for the betterment of the province.
Thank you very much once again. So ਮੇਰੀ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਐਲਨੋਰ ਸਟਰਕੋ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਇੰਡੀਪੈਂਡੈਂਟ MLA ਹੈ ਸਰੀ ਕਲੋਵਰਡੇਲ ਤੋਂ। ਕਾਫੀ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਖੁੱਲੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਬਾਤਾਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ, ਲੋਟ ਆਫ ਡੂਮ ਐਂਡ ਗਲੂਮ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਪਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਪ ਨਹੀਂ ਛੱਡਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਪਾਸੇ NDP ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਿਸਮੈਨੇਜਮੈਂਟ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਦੂਜੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਗੁੱਡ ਆਲਟਰਨੇਟਿਵ ਨਹੀਂ। ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕੋਈ ਸਮਥਿੰਗ ਵਿਲ ਕਮ ਇਨ ਦ ਮਿਡਲ, ਆਈ ਹੋਪ ਐਂਡ ਆਈ ਹੋਪ ਦੈਟ ਟੂ ਵੀ ਕੋਈ ਹੁਣ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਅਨਾਊਂਸ ਹੋਣਗੀਆਂ, ਗੱਲਾਂ ਹੋਣਗੀਆਂ ਐਂਡ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੇਗਾ। ਐਂਡ ਈਐਨ ਪੇਟਨ ਸਟੈਪ ਡਾਊਨ ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਲੋਅਰ ਮੇਨਲੈਂਡ ਦੇ ਇੰਚਾਰਜ ਬਣਾਏ ਸੀ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਸਟੈਪ ਡਾਊਨ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ। ਪਰ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੇ ਬੜਾ ਅਨਰੈਸਟ ਆਲ ਓਵਰ ਇਨ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲੀ ਐਂਡ ਅਦਰਵਾਈਜ਼। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਬਾਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਮੂਹਰੇ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਫੀਡਬੈਕ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਦਿਆ ਕਰੋ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਵਧੀਆ ਬਣਾ ਸਕੀਏ। ਧੰਨਵਾਦ। ਰੱਖ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।